You think we could start right here? The words slipped out like silk, brushing against the dim hallway and settling in the space between them like something forbidden and beautiful. Dante Carter froze, mop halfway across the polished tile. His grip tightened around the handle. He hadn't expected her, Tonite hadn't expected that. Maya Williams stood barefoot in the open doorway of her office, framed by warm amber light and silence. She wore a midnight blue dress tight fitting, soft as breath, tracing every line of her body like it had been stitched for her and her alone. The fabric hugged her hips, curved around her waist, and dipped gently at the collarbone. 32, a widow, and every inch of her carried the quiet confidence of a woman who'd walked through grief and come out the other side stronger, but not untouched. She leaned against the doorframe, holding a mug between her fingers. Her eyes were tired but open, as if she wasn't just seeing him but choosing to. "I'm serious, you know," she said, voice low and steady. "I know it doesn't make sense, but maybe it doesn't have to." Dante didn't move. He wasn't sure if he could. She took a step forward, the soft material of her dress swaying with the motion. "You come here every night, silent as breath. You fix things no one else notices, clean messes nobody thanks you for, and yet somehow, you see me." He glanced away. "I'm not supposed to talk to tenants. You're not a janitor tonight. You're a man who notices which tea I drink and leaves it just outside my door on Thursdays. You remember things. You don't flinch when I fall apart." He swallowed hard. "That was a mistake. I shouldn't have seen." "You did," she cut in gently. "And you didn't look away. You stood there like I wasn't broken, like you were waiting for me to come back from wherever I'd gone." He blinked, the mop still idle in his hands. "I spend all day being in charge," she continued. "Everyone I talk to wants something from me, through me, or for themselves. But you," she smiled faintly, a little sad, a little curious. "You clean up after the world without asking anything back. And I wonder, when was the last time anyone asked you if you wanted something?" Her words weren't flirtation, they were deeper, closer to something sacred, an opening. "I just clean, Miss Williams," Dante murmured. "Maybe," she said, taking one more step. "Or maybe you're the one person in this whole building who doesn't lie to themselves about who they are." He felt heat rising under his collar. "I should finish the floor." "You always finish the floor," she said, voice softer now. "But you never stop long enough to be part of the room." He hesitated. The silence felt like it might break if either of them moved too fast. "I wasn't sure I had permission," he said. "Well," Maya breathed. "You do now." He nodded once, slowly, then turned back to his work. The mop glided across the floor with measured grace, not rushed, not mechanical. Behind him, Maya watched for another few seconds, then disappeared into her office, leaving the door open. Later that night, back in his narrow apartment above Macmillan's barbershop, Dante sat on his worn couch, city sounds muffled by the old windows. He stared at his phone but didn't open any notifications. Instead, he replayed her voice, the way the dress moved as she leaned into the doorway, the way her words pressed gently against places he kept buried. "You think we could start right here?" He thought of his mother's voice again. "There's folks who see your back, and folks who see your eyes. Know the difference, son." And tonight, Maya had looked him in the eyes. The next evening, Dante arrived as always, 9 p.m. Same cart, same uniform, same unspoken routine. But as he neared the executive corridor, he stopped. Her door was open again. Inside, the light was warm, and on the desk, 2 cups of tea, steam curling in invitation. This time, he didn't walk past. Dante stepped into the light like a man crossing an invisible line. The soft thud of his boots against the marble tile echoed faintly behind him, but the hallway no longer felt like a corridor of power. It felt like a pause between 2 breaths. Inside Maya's office, the lights were dimmed just enough to leave the corners in shadow, warm enough to soften the gleam of the glass conference table. On the desk near the window, 2 cups sat side by side. One had a sugar cube floating lazily, just the way he liked it. "I wasn't sure if you'd come," Maya said quietly, her back turned as she adjusted the blinds. She wore another curve-hugging dress, this time in slate gray, with sleeves that grazed her wrists and a neckline that dared softness without apology. Her hair was loose tonight, cascading over one shoulder in a way that made her look less like a CEO and more like a woman trying to remember what it felt like to simply be. I wasn't either, Dante admitted. She turned. But you're here. He nodded. Yeah, I'm here. She handed him the tea. Their fingers didn't touch, but something passed between them anyway, something wordless and gently charged. They stood in silence for a moment, sipping. From 25 floors up, Boston looked peaceful, a field of stars scattered across dark streets and lit windows. But in this room, time didn't move the same way. Maya sat on the edge of her desk. Do you ever get tired of pretending you're not in the room? He looked over, surprised. What do you mean? You're careful, Dante. Every move, every word, like you're always measuring how much space you're allowed to take up. He said nothing. I see it, she went on, in how you wait for elevators to empty before stepping in, how you hold your breath when the interns pass by. Like you've already been told you don't belong and now you're just trying not to be reminded again. Dante let out a soft breath, steadying himself. I've learned it's easier that way. For who? She asked. He looked at her, finally. For everybody. Maya swirled her cup gently. And what about you? I don't make waves. She tilted her head. But you do leave ripples. Dante lowered his gaze. I didn't come up here to talk about me. Yes, you did, she said, her voice kind. You just didn't know it yet. He finished his tea in one long sip, then set the cup down carefully on a coaster. I don't know what this is, he said. Neither do I. But it's dangerous. Her smile faded into something more serious. Because I'm who I am, or because of what people might say about you. He didn't answer. Maya stood slowly, walked toward the window, her reflection a blur in the glass. When my husband died, she said, people started treating me like glassware, breakable, beautiful, silent. But you're the first person who looked at me like I'm still solid. Dante shifted. I don't want to be a project. You're not. I don't want pity, or curiosity, or you want truth. He looked at her sharply. She turned to him, arms crossed gently under her chest. Then stay a little longer. Let's just be two people in a room. No uniforms, no business cards, no rules. He hesitated, then nodded once. She moved to the side table and retrieved a small black speaker. With a flick of her wrist, soft jazz filled the room, Coltrane, slow and sultry. It curled around them like smoke. I never thought I'd dance again, she said almost to herself. Dante raised an eyebrow. I didn't peg you for a dancer. I'm not, she smiled, walking back toward him. But I remember how. There was no invitation in her gesture, no demand in her eyes, just a woman standing in front of a man, both tired of being mistaken for things they were not. He took her hand. Her skin was warm. They moved slowly, barely shifting, just swaying in place as the music pulsed gently from the speaker. It wasn't a dance so much as an agreement to be present, to not shrink, to not apologize. You know this doesn't change anything outside this room, Dante said quietly. I know. There will be whispers, looks, maybe worse. She didn't flinch. Let them look. I don't belong in your world, Maya. She leaned closer, her cheek brushing his shoulder. Then maybe it's time I stepped into yours. The song ended, but neither moved. Outside, the city blinked and breathed. Inside, they stood in the quiet that follows truth, a silence, not empty, but full. Maya finally pulled back, her eyes soft but clear. This wasn't a trap. I know. I'm not asking for anything. I know. She smiled. But if you ever did want something, Dante met her gaze. I'd want it to start here. She nodded, and this time, she was the one who walked away first. Back to her desk, back to her world. But the door stayed open, and Dante, for the first time in years, let it stay that way. The next few nights passed without routine, but not without rhythm. Dante still showed up just before 9, same cart, same uniform, but now with something new beneath it, an awareness, of her, of himself, of the way the world around them hadn't changed, but something between them had. He didn't always stop by her office. Sometimes he just walked past, letting the flickering light of her doorway brush his shoulder. Sometimes he left a cup of tea on the ledge, and sometimes, like on Thursday, she was already waiting for him, barefoot, dressed soft and shaped to her form, 2 cups already poured. They didn't talk about what they were doing. They didn't label it, because labels came with expectations. and expectations came with consequences. But word, as it does in office buildings, began to stretch and slither. On Monday morning, a junior copywriter posted a blurry image to the company Slack. It was grainy, taken from the far end of the hallway, but unmistakable Dante standing in the soft light of Maya's office, handing her something, maybe tea, maybe nothing. The caption read, "Looks like CEO Williams has a new after-hours advisor." By lunchtime, the post had disappeared, but not before it was screenshotted. By Thursday, whispers filled the break room. On Friday, HR requested a brief word with Maya. She sat across from the director, legs crossed, expression unreadable. "There have been some observations," the woman said carefully, "concerns regarding professional boundaries with maintenance staff." "Are they concerned about tea or about skin tone?" Maya replied coolly. The woman blinked. "I don't think it's appropriate to frame it that way." "Then maybe you're not listening clearly enough." That night, Maya didn't wait by the door. The office was dark. The tea was cold. Dante stood in the hallway for a long moment, unsure. He didn't knock. He didn't call out. He just placed the cup gently on the floor and moved on. 2 nights later, he was at the laundromat on Tremont, folding shirts with quiet precision, when his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. "You don't answer unknowns, huh?" Maya's voice came through, tired but steady. "Depends on the night." "Well, tonight, I could use some company. And I don't just mean your mop." Dante smiled faintly. "I'm off duty." "I'm not." There was silence then. Front doors open. Her apartment was not what he expected. It wasn't sleek and glass like her office. It was warm, worn in, with books stacked on tables and candles burned halfway down. The couch was soft, the kind that swallowed you when you sat. A half-finished painting leaned against the wall, strokes of blue and rust slashing across the canvas. She was in leggings and a long, oversized t-shirt, hair pulled into a messy knot. No makeup, no audience. "Didn't think you'd come," she said, voice quieter than usual. "Didn't think you'd ask," he replied, stepping inside. She gestured to the coffee table where 2 takeout boxes waited. "Thai. I didn't know what you liked, so I guessed." "You guessed right." They ate on the floor, backs against the couch, knees drawn close. They didn't speak much, just the occasional sound of noodles against chopsticks, the soft hum of Miles Davis playing low in the background. It was Maya who broke the silence. "They called you a charity project." Dante looked up slowly. "Someone in the office. Not to my face, of course, but enough times that it got back around." He didn't flinch. "That's not new. Number. But it's not okay either." He set his box down. "You don't need to defend me." "I'm not defending you," she said. "I'm defending us, whatever us means." He met her eyes. "They don't see me, Maya. They see what it means that you see me. And they're scared of that." He gave a humorless smile. "They should be." Maya reached for the wine bottle on the floor beside her, poured them each a glass. "I've spent my whole career being perfect, sharp, controlled, not because I wanted to impress anyone, but because if I wasn't, they'd replace me with someone who smiled more and cost less." She handed him a glass. "But you make me forget the performance." He took the glass, studied the color. "And what do I make you remember?" She looked at him, unwavering. "That I'm still allowed to want something just because it feels good. Not strategic, not smart, just right." He drank. "That's a dangerous thing to remember. I'm done living safely." They didn't kiss that night. There was no crescendo. Just 2 people, side by side, on a floor neither of them had planned to share. At midnight, he stood to leave. "I'll see you tomorrow," she said as he reached the door. He paused. "Will you?" Her smile was tired, but there. "That depends. Will you let yourself be seen again?" He didn't answer. But this time, he didn't shut the door behind him either. But that night, Maya stayed in her office a little longer, not working, just sitting there, listening to the hum of the city, and the faint, fading echo of a man's voice who spoke like he knew loneliness too. And maybe you felt that way too. If this moment stirred something within you, go ahead and hit like. Sometimes, stories like this deserve to be felt together. But Maya didn't have words for what she was feeling, only the echo of his voice, still soft in her ears. The next morning came with rain soft, steady and relentless. Boston streets glistened under silver skies, and traffic moved like tired ants in the drizzle. Dante stood under the awning of the hardware supply store on Washington Street, coffee in hand, waiting for the delivery truck that was now 35 minutes late. But his mind wasn't on the order forms in his back pocket. It was still in her living room, still on that floor, beside half-finished pad thai and a woman who didn't blink when the world threw knives at them both. She hadn't asked for anything. Not a promise, not a name, not even clarity. But something about the way she looked at him, barefoot in a paint-stained t-shirt, like he wasn't a mistake but maybe the beginning of something she hadn't realized she needed that lingered. His phone buzzed in his jacket. It was a message. Maya, no tea tonight. I've got a board dinner. Wish me luck with the wolves. He smiled, thumb hovering over the reply. Dante, don't let them smell your mercy, or your wine. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then came back. Maya, so you are thinking about me. He stared at that screen a long time, then slid the phone back into his pocket. The truck finally pulled in. Time to work. By the time evening came, the building felt different, colder, not because she wasn't there, but because she should have been. Dante moved through the floors with practiced rhythm, bathrooms, conference rooms, hallways. But when he reached the executive level, he paused outside her office. The door was closed, but a faint light glowed from beneath. She hadn't mentioned coming back. He knocked once. No answer. Inside, the room was empty, warm, still smelled faintly of lavender and paper. A shawl was draped over the back of her chair, as if she'd left in a rush. On the desk, a yellow sticky note with messy handwriting. Friday can't come fast enough. Dante read it twice, then tucked it under the edge of her keyboard so no one else would see. Then he left. Friday came, and with it, the firestorm. At 10:37 a.m., an anonymous email was sent to the internal company listserv. The subject line, "Who's cleaning up after Maya?" Attached was the Slack screenshot from earlier in the week. Dante in the doorway of her office and 2 blurry photos someone had clearly taken from street level. Him entering her apartment building late at night, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. The message was short, laced with venom. Nepotism, or just poor taste? The office buzzed like a shaken hive. Maya found out while standing in front of her team, presenting a rebranding proposal for a major account. Her assistant slipped her phone into her hand. She read the message once, then again, and didn't flinch. She closed her laptop. "Let's take 10, folks." Then she walked out. Dante was under a sink in an old church on Tremont when his phone rang. He nearly ignored it, but when he saw her name, he answered. "You saw it?" she asked. "Yeah. They're calling it inappropriate. HR says it's a liability issue." Dante sat back on his heels. "You want me to stay away? I want you to decide if that's what you want." He didn't answer right away. "Look," she said, her voice lower, rougher. "I know this isn't what you signed up for. I know it's messy, but I also know I haven't felt this, honest, in years. I'm not ashamed," he said simply. "I know you're not, but I don't want you to pay the price alone. Then don't disappear." "I won't." A pause. Then she added, "But if you change your mind, if it's too loud." "I've lived in noise, Maya," he said, "but I never had anyone worth listening through it for." That night, he didn't take the service elevator. He walked through the front lobby, past the startled receptionist, and stepped into the executive wing like he belonged there. Because maybe, just maybe, he did. Her door was open. She was standing at the window, blazer draped over her chair, hair down. A soft jazz instrumental played from the corner. He didn't say anything. She didn't turn. Then, without looking, she spoke. "They want me to make a statement. Let me guessdeny, deflect, apologize." She nodded. "Maybe step back for a while." "And?" I told them no. Now she turned. "I'm not stepping back. Not from my job. And not from you." Dante stood still. "That's a big move." "So was walking in here with your head up." He let out a slow breath. "So, what now?" She stepped closer, stopping just inches from him. Her eyes held that same fire he'd seen that night in her apartment. Not wild, not reckless, just steady, earned. "Now," she said, "we stand, and we don't hide." He searched her face. "You sure?" I've been hiding long before you ever showed up, Dante. You didn't start the storm. You just made me stop pretending it wasn't raining. For a long second, neither of them moved. Then he reached for her hand. She took it. No more shadows, no more silent hallways. Just two people, choosing to be seen. Together. It started with a whisper. A client called to reschedule a pitch meeting. Then another postponed a quarterly review. And by the end of the week, one of their long-term accounts quietly transferred their design contract to another agency in Cambridge. No explanations. No accusations. Just silence, disguised as professionalism. Maya sat in her office, shoulders drawn tight, eyes scanning the latest numbers from finance. 3 lines of red where there used to be green. A polite memo from the board. We support you, but we need discretion. Code, of course, for fix this or fade out. Dante knew none of this until Friday night. He found her sitting cross-legged on the office couch, her heels off, one foot tucked beneath her. The room was lit only by the soft hum of the city through the windows, and an untouched cup of tea sat cooling on the table beside her. She didn't look up when he entered. They're backing away, she said flatly. One by one. He closed the door behind him. Because of me. No, she said quickly. Because of us. Because it makes them uncomfortable. He stepped closer. You're not thinking of backing down, are you? She looked at him then, really looked. Do I seem like the backing down type? He sat beside her. No. But you do seem tired. I am, she admitted, voice barely above a whisper. Not from the work. From the pretending. I spent years building a reputation that would shield me. Turns out, it was just a pretty cage. He reached over, gently took her hand. Then maybe it's time to stop performing for people who only clap when it benefits them. She leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. How do you stay so steady? I don't, he said. I just learned how to be still in the middle of noise. They stayed like that for a long while. Outside, the wind picked up, brushing against the windows like fingers drumming for attention. Inside, they didn't move, didn't speak, just existed in the same space, breathing together. Eventually, Maya pulled back, her expression more resolved than weary. I'm writing a letter, she said. A public one. He raised an eyebrow. Like, open letter? She nodded. To the people who think they can define me, and you, and what this is. Dante didn't say anything right away. Then, you sure? I've never been more. He nodded once. Then say what needs saying. But don't do it for me. She looked puzzled. What do you mean? Do it because you're done shrinking. Not because you're trying to save me. I don't need saving, Maya. I just want standing next to. A small smile curled at the edge of her mouth. Well, then let's stand. 2 days later, the letter was published. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't long. Just a single page, plain font, signed in her name. Some will call this rebellion. But rebellion implies chaos. What we're building is something else. Structure, honesty, courage. If seeing a black man beside a white woman still stirs outrage in 2025, maybe the problem isn't the couple. Maybe it's the lens we still refuse to clean. The post went viral in under an hour. Local blogs picked it up, then design magazines. Then a late-night talk show host quoted it on air. And with that, the story shifted. They weren't a scandal anymore. They were a statement. Of course, not everyone celebrated. One afternoon, Dante arrived at a property in Beacon Hill, scheduled electrical repair for an older brownstone. The owner, a sharp-faced woman in pearls and a polished suit, opened the door with tight lips and arms crossed. You're from Carter Works? She asked. Yes, ma'am, he said evenly. She eyed him. You're the one from that article. He said nothing. She turned slightly, just enough for him to hear her say into her phone, He's here. I told you she was making a mockery of herself. Still, he did the job. Fixed the panel, checked the breakers, left the invoice on the counter, and when she refused to meet his eyes as he left, he didn't flinch. Back in his truck, Maya had texted, lunch at the studio? Bring paint hands. That afternoon, he met her at the new space she'd rented, a small storefront downtown. One half was already set up for her design firm. The other side was raw, open, with drop cloths on the floor and canvases leaning against the walls. He stepped in, wiping sweat from his neck. You sure about this? She grinned. I didn't buy this to hide. I bought it so we could build something real. He stared at the walls, then at her. You're really not scared, are you? I'm terrified, she said. But I'd rather be terrified building something true than be comfortable living a lie. He looked around, then down at his own hands, rough, calloused, stained from work. Then he smiled. All right then, let's build. And somewhere between the paint and the plans, between the brushes and the wires, between the silence they used to sit in and the laughter they were starting to share, they began laying the foundation for something that might actually last. The following weeks unfolded not like a storm, but like rain that refused to stop quiet, persistent, capable of reshaping everything over time. Carter Works and Maya's design studio shared the storefront, side by side. On one side, tools, fused diagrams, the smell of sawdust. On the other, palettes, brushes, and a wall slowly filling with paintings that looked like they were breathing. The sign above the door read simple and bold, Williams and Carter Studio. They didn't throw a grand opening. Instead, they started small. A handwritten flyer taped to a nearby coffee shop window. A post shared quietly on Maya's Instagram. Saturday Fix-It Day. Free minor repairs for seniors, veterans, and single parents. No questions asked. Come with a story or don't just come. The first Saturday, 5 people showed up. By the third weekend, they had a line. Dante brought 2 of his old apprentice buddies, Devin and Jalen Young, sharp, hungry to do real work that mattered. Maya taught them how to hold a paintbrush the way she taught herself how to hold a grief-stricken heart. Firm, honest, unflinching. Their space began to change too. A mural went up on the inside wall sketched by Maya, colored in by neighborhood kids. It showed 2 hands on dark, one light building a bridge from scraps, bolts, and bright light. No signatures, just colors. One evening, as Dante rolled up the garage-style door after closing, Maya handed him a sandwich wrapped in brown paper and a cold root beer. You always feed the crew, he teased. You're not crew, she said, then added, your foundation. He gave a soft laugh. That sounds heavier than I'm used to. She leaned on the doorway next to him. You carry weight like it's oxygen. He took a bite, chewed thoughtfully, then asked, you ever think we're pushing too hard, too fast? She didn't answer right away. Then, every day. But I've also learned that if you wait for permission to be who you are, you'll die with your voice still in your throat. He looked at her. You're getting poetic again. She grinned. Occupational hazard. That night, they didn't go home separately. Instead, they sat on the floor of the studio long after the lights were off, sharing stories of things they didn't tell many people. Dante told her about the time his mother taught him to rewire a lamp after their landlord refused to fix the lights in their apartment. He was 10. She said, you fix the dark by touching it, son, not by waiting for someone else. Maya told him about the gallery that once told her she was too urban for their taste. Right after offering to buy her painting at a discount, she left her name off it. They didn't kiss, but they didn't need to. Sometimes intimacy was just sitting close enough to hear the other person breathe, and not needing to fill the space with anything but presence. The next morning brought a new challenge. An email, anonymous again, sent to the local press, CC'd to the city business registry and Maya's board. It included photos of Maya and Dante at the mural wall, one of him holding a drill, another of her painting with children. The tone wasn't cruel, but it was pointed. Are these the optics Williams and Carter want to be known for? Charity work as branding? Romance as rebellion? Should professionalism come second to performance? Maya read it in silence, jaw tight. Dante looked over her shoulder, reading the words like bullets. They're trying to dress judgment in concern. Let them. I can make a statement, he said. Or I can step back. Give this room to breathe. She turned to him. Don't you dare. He blinked. She stepped forward. Don't you dare let them shame us into silence. This isn't about a picture. It's about people who've built their comfort on watching others stay small. You said you didn't need saving. Fine. I don't either. But I need partnership. And partners don't hide. He exhaled slowly. All right then. What do we do? We paint louder, she said. They responded the only way they knew how. The next Fix-It Day, they rolled up the door and invited in a reporter from a local nonprofit podcast. Maya spoke plainly. Dante didn't try to impress. They talked about the work, the kids, the repairs, the stories. And when the host asked what made them different from any other business downtown, Maya said, "We don't build for applause. We build because people deserve to feel safe where they live and seen where they stand." The story aired that Sunday. It wasn't explosive, but it was enough. Enough for a woman in Roxbury to write a handwritten letter thanking them for fixing her mother's heater. Enough for a retired mechanic to drop off a box of tools he hadn't touched since his hands started shaking. Enough for 3 kids from the neighborhood to show up every Saturday asking to help fix stuff. That night, as Dante turned off the lights and Maya gathered brushes, she asked quietly, "You still scared?" He didn't lie. "Yeah." "Of what?" "Of how much this matters. Of what it'll cost. Of who we might lose." She nodded, then walked over, rested her forehead against his chest. "But we won't lose us," she whispered, and he believed her. Not because she promised, but because every day she kept choosing to stay, and so did he. The next chapter was already writing itself. With every paint stroke, every bolt, every breath, they refused to take in silence. The storm came not with thunder, but with a name. Walter Crenshaw. The first time Maya heard it, she was standing at the studio sink, rinsing paint off her fingers, watching the colors bleed like memories. Dante stepped in from the back office, a file in his hand, his face unreadable. "We've got company," he said simply. "Walter Crenshaw, real estate development magnate, owner of the Carter Works property and half the block around it." Maya raised an eyebrow. "And? He's offering to buy us out. Says we're sitting on prime commercial frontage. Wants to elevate the neighborhood's potential." Dante made air quotes with a bitter smile. "Offered a generous compensation package to dissolve the lease early." She dried her hands slowly. "Why now?" "He says it's about expansion," Dante replied. "But I looked deeper. He's been quietly buying up black-owned businesses on this street for the last year. Our success? It made us visible, and now we're inconvenient." Maya turned to the window. Outside, the mural glowed in the early evening light. Kids had drawn tiny stars between the 2 hands on the wall. She whispered, "He wants to paint over us." Dante stood beside her. "Unless we'll let him." The next day, Walter arrived in person. Tall, polished, white. He wore an expensive suit with an unbothered smile. His assistant, a young woman who barely made eye contact, trailed behind him, scribbling notes on a tablet. Maya greeted him at the front of the studio, dressed in overalls, paint still fresh on her cheekbone. "I don't do suits on weekdays," she said flatly. He chuckled, as if she'd made a joke. "Miss Williams, you're a very talented woman, and frankly, this community's lucky to have you. But you've got to think bigger. Imagine what this could become: a flagship art space in one of my new complexes. Your name, in lights. With the right backing, you could do more than murals." "I don't want my name in lights," she replied. "I want kids on this street to know that Hands Black Hand Scan build beauty that doesn't need permission." Ugh. Walter's smile faltered for the first time. Dante came out from the back. No smile, just presence. Walter straightened. "Ah, Mr. Carter. Still tinkering, I see?" "I fix things," Dante said evenly. "And I recognize rot when I smell it." Walter clapped his hands once. "Well, I see where this is going. But I'll warn you, both real estate is a machine. Sentimentality doesn't slow it down. If you're still here in 30 days, you'll be here illegally." He turned on his heel and left. The silence afterward was heavier than drywall. Dante paced. "He's not bluffing." "No," Maya agreed, "but he's betting we'll fold." That night, they sat on the roof of the building, knees touching, not speaking much. Then Maya broke the silence. "You ever lose something you fought for?" Dante nodded slowly. "Yeah. My mother's house. After she died, the city sold it over unpaid taxes. She lived there 38 years. Maya closed her eyes. "I won't let that happen here." Neither would he. The next morning, she walked into City Hall. Not alone. With her were 6 elders from the neighborhood, 2 veterans from the Fix-It crew, and Miss Eleanor, an 81-year-old with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue who wheeled herself right up to the permits counter and announced, "This is a protest. We brought snacks." They filed a motion for historic designation using the mural as community heritage. They submitted affidavits from local kids, Seniors, veterans, small business owners, each one testifying to what the studio had become. Not a brand, but a home, a hope. Walter fired back with lawyers. They answered with people. A week later, the podcast host returned, this time with a documentary crew. A local news channel aired a segment, The Studio That Refused to Disappear. And one night, Maya walked out back and found Dante at the loading dock, gripping a letter. "They've frozen our account," he said. "Pending investigation. False claims workshop, safety violations, some nonsense about zoning irregularities." Maya took the paper from him, scanned it, her jaw locking tight. "This is war," she said. Dante nodded. "And it's just getting started." But she wasn't afraid. She walked up to him, placed her hand on his chest, right over the place where his heartbeat still drummed, steady and strong. "They want to bury us," she said softly, "but they don't know we're the roots." They stood there as the night pressed in, not speaking, not backing down, just breathing in tandem. And in the silence, something ancient passed between them, not just love, not just resolve, but legacy. The next chapter would not be about defense. It would be about defiance. It would be about standing not as victims, but as witnesses. Witnesses to their own worth, to each other's courage, and to the truth that no mano name, no suit, no threat could erase what had been built with open hands, honest labor, and unapologetic love. Dawn came gray and hard. Maya stood in front of the mural, arms crossed, hoodie pulled tight against the morning chill. Her breath clouded in the air. Behind her, the studio remained dark, closed until further notice by a so-called city order. But the mural still blazed with color, still showed two hands zoned dark, one light reaching toward each other. Still whispered to the block, "We are still here." Footsteps approached. Heavy boots on sidewalk. Dante joined her, carrying 2 styrofoam cups of coffee, steam curling up like prayers. He handed her one without a word. They stood shoulder to shoulder for a long moment. "They're setting the hearing for Friday," he said finally. Maya sipped, eyes locked on the paint-streaked wall. "You ready?" "I was born ready," Dante muttered. "But we're outgunned. He's got lawyers with last names longer than our lease." "I know," she said. "That's why we won't fight him alone." By noon, the studio's tiny back alley was filled. Kids, neighbors, veterans, local teachers and retired postal workers. Even the shy barber from down the street brought folding chairs and passed out water. They weren't protesting. They were testifying just by showing up. Miss Eleanor rolled in wearing a black beret and an old March on Washington button. "My bones may be brittle," she said, "but I still stand for justice." Someone had brought paint. A blank wooden panel leaned against the studio fence, and people began to add to it brushstrokes of memory. A kid painted his grandma's rocking chair. Another drew his dad's welding gloves. An elderly man painted his first Navy ship, sailing on blue waves. No one directed them. It just happened. Maya stepped back and watched the collage grow. Her eyes stung. Then a familiar voice rose behind her. Deep, warm, steady. "I spent a decade cleaning offices no one looked twice at," Dante said to the small gathering. "I used to walk past this mural after midnight, thinking no one knew it was there. But one night, she left the lights on." He turned slightly to Maya, and I realized it wasn't the paint that mattered. It was what she saw when she made it. The crowd fell silent. Maya looked down, humbled, then stepped forward. "There's power in building something with your own hands," she said. "But there's more power in saying no when someone tries to take it." The moment hung in the air like a spark. Then someone clapped, then another. Soon, the entire alley rang with applause, not loud or forced, but certain. The kind that said, "We're with you." But the storm hadn't passed. That evening, Maya found a plain envelope slipped under her apartment door. No return address. Inside, 3 printed photos. One of her walking home late, alone. One of Dante locking the studio gate. One of the mural half covered in black spray paint. No note, just proof. She dropped the envelope on her kitchen table and sat down slowly, her hands trembling. Dante was at her door 15 minutes later, breathless. "I got the same envelope." They sat in silence, eyes on the photos. Fear curled around their ribs like smoke. Not the kind that screamed, but the kind that whispered, "We're watching." "Whoever sent this knows where we live," Maya said quietly. They want us rattled, Dante replied. It's working. He reached for her hand. Only if we let it. That night, she didn't sleep. Instead, she pulled out a notebook, started writing. Not a manifesto, not a statement for the press, but a list. Names. Every person who had ever walked through the studio doors. Every child who painted. Every elder who taught. Every laugh that had echoed inside those walls. She filled pages, and by dawn, her hands hurt but her fear had quieted. Friday came cold. The city hearing was held in a municipal building with gray walls and fluorescent lights. Walter Crenshaw arrived flanked by lawyers in matching suits, smug and well-rested. Maya and Dante walked in with no attorneys. Just people. Miss Eleanor was wheeled to the front row. The kids sat in the back, fidgeting, dressed in their best. One clutched a crumpled drawing of the mural. The hearing began. Walter's attorney spoke first, polished, calm. This property has commercial potential. Our client's proposal would create jobs, generate tax revenue, and elevate the neighborhood's economic standing. Maya's turn. She stood. No podium, no papers, just her voice. I don't have slides or spreadsheets, she said, but I have stories. And then, one by one, people stood beside her. The veteran who found community again. The teen who stayed off the streets because of art classes. The mother who said her autistic child finally spoke during a music circle. Each voice built on the last, like a rising tide. When it was over, the room was silent. Even Walter seemed smaller. The council recessed. They'd announce their decision Monday. Outside, as the crowd spilled onto the sidewalk, Maya exhaled deeply. We showed up, she said. Dante nodded. We always do. She looked at him then, sunlight catching his jawline, and for a split second, she forgot about the mural, the lawsuit, the photos. She just saw him, and in that quiet beat between the chaos, she whispered, "Thank you for not walking away." He smiled. Wasn't an option, but as they turned to go, none of them noticed the man across the street, dark coat, phone pressed to his ear, watching them, not smiling, because some storms don't end. They just pause, waiting. It rained that weekend. A soft, soaking rain that draped the city in a hush. Maya sat by the window of her apartment, one hand wrapped around a mug of lukewarm coffee, the other tracing slow circles on the condensation gathering on the glass. Her eyes weren't on the street below. They were inward back to the man across the street, the one she hadn't noticed until it was too late. Dante had seen him later on the surveillance footage, standing half-hidden beneath a city bus stop, holding a phone, watching the crowd, watching her. You think he's working for Crenshaw? She had asked. Dante didn't answer right away. He just nodded once, eyes narrowed. He's not the kind of man who loses gracefully. Sunday night brought thunder, the kind that rolled in low and long, shaking the floorboards and making Maya's lights flicker once, twice. She stared at her living room wall, where the photos from the envelope were now pinned side by side like unwanted trophies. You don't scare me, she whispered aloud. But her voice caught slightly at the end, and in the quiet that followed, her phone rang. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. Miss Williams. The voice was male, crisp. This is Officer Howard from the 9th Precinct. I need to ask you a few questions about an incident involving Mr. Dante Lee. Maya sat up straighter. What happened? He's being held for questioning, the officer said. There was an altercation near a construction site. We need someone to confirm his identity and vouch for his whereabouts. I'm coming, she said instantly, already grabbing her coat. At the station, fluorescent lights hummed overhead as she sat across from a weary desk sergeant who looked like he hadn't slept in days. They said there was an incident, Maya said, breath short. Where is he? Room 3, the sergeant said, barely looking up. But just so you know, there's no formal charge yet. It's a misunderstanding. Maya's heels echoed against the hallway tiles as she walked. When the door to room 3 opened, she saw him sitting at a steel table, hands clasped, brows drawn together not in fear, but in a slow, contained rage. Maya, he said softly. Her chest tightened. She rushed to him. What happened? Some guy said I threatened him, Dante replied, jaw clenched. He was painting over the side of our building black spray paint. I told him to stop. He swung at me first. I didn't even hit him. But they arrested you. He said I looked threatening. The words hung there like poison. Maya's face hardened. You're being framed, she whispered. Crenshaw's pulling strings. He looked up at her then, eyes sharp. That man at the mural. He wasn't just watching us. He was coordinating. We need help, Maya said. Outside help. They got it the next morning. Mr. Raymond Archerin, aging civil rights lawyer, semi-retired, with more stubbornness than suit, showed up at Maya's studio unannounced. He wore a brown fedora and carried a copy of the city charter under one arm. I heard about your mural, he said, and about Crenshaw, and about Dante being held. Maya blinked. You heard? Miss Williams, in this town, injustice travels faster than the morning paper. He walked right in like he'd always belonged there, scanning the room, nodding once. You've got the city council's attention. Now it's time to make them remember their own bylaws. That afternoon, Archer filed an injunction. Public property defacing, racially motivated intimidation, civil liberties violations. His paperwork made waves. And just like that, Crenshaw's team started squirming. But it wasn't over. That night, Maya got another letter. This one wasn't anonymous. It was typed, sealed with a formal letterhead. A real estate acquisition firm. Dear Miss Williams, our client wishes to extend one final offer for the property located at 116 South Halston Street. A generous figure, expedited processing, no legal entanglements. Consider this a courtesy. No threats, just precision, just pressure. The kind that didn't use fists, just erasers. She stared at the number on the page. It could have paid off her student loans, her mother's hospital bills, given her years of comfort, but it would have meant silence. She folded the letter neatly and dropped it into the trash. They don't know me, she said. And that's when she saw it through her window. Someone across the street, watching, again, but this time, she didn't flinch. She picked up her phone and dialed Dante. You free? She asked. Always, he said. Then meet me at the mural. It's time we told the city who we really are. That night, under the dim glow of string lights, with brush in hand, Maya repainted the parts of the mural that had been defaced. Not covered, but transformed. She turned the black spray paint into silhouettes, into shadows, into contrast that made the light stand out even brighter. Dante stood beside her, rolling paint along the border. This is war, he said. Not war, Maya replied. Reclamation. And around them, people gathered. Quiet at first, then singing. A low hum rising into full voices. Old church tunes, freedom songs. Someone brought a guitar. Someone else beat a drum on a bucket. By midnight, the mural shone again stronger, bolder. And from the shadows, the watcher slipped away, unnoticed. Because some things you can intimidate, but a community, when it remembers who it is, cannot be erased.